I'm an executive coach and I'm interested in leadership performance. I like to say to those who work with me with a better understanding of what's needed to succeed further. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about a small piece of information around helping high performers perform and helping high performers perform better. Ultimately, it's a simple question of getting their minds freed up, if you like, and I'll talk about why that's important. So, a bit of show of hands, seem to work interestingly. A bit of audience participation of who's heard of or who has experienced an enabled hijack. A bit of show of hands? No. What is wrong with you guys? What's the story? Are you still asleep? Did you get up this morning? So, the amygdala hijack is an interesting phenomenon that we all suffer. We suffer it all the time, in fact. And we suffer it ourselves, and we suffer it from those around us. So I'm going to talk a bit about what that is and what we can do about it. To do that, I'm going to start with looking at the brain. Now, I'm not from a medical background, okay? I'm a coach. So anyone who has a medical background, you can sit and giggle at my terminology, enjoy it. So if you like, the brain's made up of three main parts. We have the lower part, section in green there, also known as the reptilian part of our brain. We have then the middle part, or the mammalian or mammal part of our brain, the blue section. And then we have the upper brain, or the human brain, or the thinking brain, as it's called, the rational brain. And the namings there are because of our association with said creatures. So the reptilian brain, the lower brain, we share that characteristics of that part of the brain with anything that's evolved from reptiles, any reptiles exist at the moment. And that part of the brain would you be familiar with as fight or flight. Or as my kids prefer to call it, can I eat it or will it eat me? Okay. So it has a very simple function, it's really to keep us alive. The middle part, it's the emotional centre. Okay? It's associated with mammals because it's where our emotions come from, where our feelings come from. It's through the emotions that we then create bonds with other mammals and with our young. The upper part of the brain then is the logical part or the thinking part. It's also largely around the prefrontal cortex, to use the proper term. It's where we take the responses to everything going on in our world, we process it, we make decisions about it. Okay, so the amygdala. The amygdala sits in here. It's a very small part of the brain. It sits in the reptilian part. It's actually connected to all the brain though. And its job is to take our emotions and then search for matches within our memories and then apply those. Its job is about survival. Right? And it has a very, very important role in terms of survival. If, for example, we get an emotion from a ball approaching us very quickly, right, we want reflexes there kicking in to catch it or kick it. If a dog dashes across us in front of us on the road, the reflex is going to kick in and hopefully avoid that. Okay. So it has a very important role in helping us survive. It also has some unideal consequences. And that comes from when we, in a situation we hear a comment or a tone or a situation before us which has an extreme reaction with our emotions. Right? Somebody says something to you in a meeting or passing on the street or at your desk or an email tone. Right? As soon as that comes into the middle brain, the amygdala is going to grab it and start processing it. It's going to start looking through our memories for a match. As soon as it finds that match, it's going to apply it to our actions. It has the ability to shut down the rest of our brain. It has the ability to apply that into our thinking, into our actions, and we'll act. Now, we're not talking about catching a ball or avoiding a dog, that's fine. We're talking about comments made by those around us or situations before us. It's not so good because those memories are from our past. And the past is rarely the same as the situation we're in right now. Okay? You're not able to take into context, specific context about situations, any of the nuances. So that the amygdala has a job then to take those memories, those things you did in that situation before, and apply them. those things you said, those things you did. Right? Some classic examples would be find myself trying to get the kids out the door. Okay, go on a family excursion. Okay, 1 minute I'm guiding them to their coats and their gloves, and next thing I'm shouting and yelling at them. Okay, something happened that triggered a response in the amygdala and it took over. Right? Or at a meeting, I find myself sulking when I don't like the tone or the direction of the meeting. Right? That's again the amygdala kicking in some emotion and shutting down my thinking capacity. Right? Or shooting off that email in that response, that fired email to send. That's the amygdala work, the amygdala kicking in again. So it's not all bad news. Because what happens in the emotions in the middle brain is when we get them, when we get that feeling, when we get that sense of what just happened before us, those feelings are as simultaneously made available to the amygdala, they're also made available to our upper brain at the exact same moment, right? And if our upper brain starts thinking about those emotions, considering them consciously, the amygdala will quieten down. It will think, great, somebody's in control here, I'll do nothing. And that gives us the time to think about it, process it, decide what we're going to do with it. So that's really the key, right, to basically being in control of ourselves. Now there is a speed bump, and the speed bump is quite simple. Is that for the upper brain to get that emotion, start processing it, right, it needs to be free, clear. If the mind, the upper brain, is thinking about something, that report that's going to be written, having that conversation, or that email, or somebody's going home, or vice versa, it's not going to pick up that emotion fast enough. It's particularly the strong emotion, because the amygdala is very fast, and we're talking fractions of seconds. So the amygdala, if you particularly strong emotion, the amygdala will find a response and take over. And once it takes over, it's very, very difficult to state it out. It will just execute. So, the slide this one through. So, the problem we have then is the complexity we're in, the world we're in. It's not as simple as saying, great, I'll just calm my mind, because there's so much going on. There's an enormous amount of stuff coming at us continually. There's an enormous amount of things we're thinking about continually. We just don't have the luxury of saying we're just going to quiet our mind. And that's where the idea of emotional intelligence comes in. Emotional intelligence, you would have heard that phrase around a bit, right? And effectively, to use the original definition when it started to come out, it's ultimately about controlling, being aware of emotions and controlling them. So being aware of your emotions and controlling them. So making conscious decisions about what you're going to do. The amygdala hijack is not emotional intelligence, it's the anti-side of that. Right? Those who you see and feel around you have great control over things that are around them, they have a high sense of emotional intelligence. The good thing about emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, emotional intelligence can be taught and it can be strengthened with practice. And ultimately it's these two areas. So emotional intelligence is firstly self-awareness. Without self-awareness, being able to capture those emotions as they come through your middle brain is pointless if you don't really know how to make decisions about the problem. If you don't understand what you value, what your strengths are. Unless you understand those, the decisions you're making are going to be less than ideal. And the second aspect of this is the ability to observe. You need the ability to observe your emotions. There's a lot of interest at the moment around the concept of being mindful, or also mindfulness, which is not the same thing, though practicing mindfulness will help you be mindful. But being mindful is simple by definition, is being aware. It's your ability to see and hear what's going on in your mind and being aware of it. And the final aspect of emotions is the efficiency in thinking and doing. Because if your mind is clogged up with everything that's going on, you're not going to be fast enough to catch the emotion before the amygdala kicks in. So what can we do? Helping others. So back to performance. The point of this talk was to look at how can you help high performers perform and high performers continue to perform better. And in my view, it comes down to these three things. as learning development professionals, it's increased self-awareness, right? So have your senior people, your leaders, your team leaders, anybody who is moving into a more complex world, which is have them understand their values, their traits, their skills, the things they're doing. Get them through programs which allow them to understand that. The second thing is efficiency in thinking and doing. And I can certainly share more later, and you can look this up. It's really about getting better systems, personal systems for managing the complexity of life. And the final thing is reducing the complexity. So in our world, in our work environments, typically the complexity is fierce. We have cultures which, meeting cultures, we have email, we have too much reliance on things which don't work properly for us. So the onus of the learning development is to reduce the complexity, make a better environment where the amount going on coming at us can be reduced. If we don't reduce the complexity, if we don't help ourselves think more clearly and better, and we don't increase our awareness, we are creating the environment, the perfect conditions for learning and hygiene, and it will continue, and you'll see it. A couple of references there if you're looking for them. The amygdala hijack is a phrase coined by David Goleman. He's written extensively on this. Some would argue he's not the expert on it. Certainly Mr. Lloyd and Mayo would argue that. But his latest book in 2001 has really good work on this in terms of trying to understand it. And there's obviously there's a paper in 1990 which goes into emotional intelligence if you want to start there. My details there if you'd like to follow up. Any questions? Yes?
Maybe it's not directly from your presentation, but I'd like to ask, this is HR session, so I think 2 months before K Connection, and also I want to be like perfectionist, so it slows down my performing tasks all within the deadlines. Can you give me some advice? Or should I look for jobs that requires kind of those extra?
So what's the question? What are you looking for?
What's your advice on people who have kind of perfectionist type of
Perfectionism. You can look up things I talk about borrowed belief. Perfection is a borrowed belief. Perfection is a care to do things right and it's perfect. It's about controlling that and harnessing that power. And the key with it is the pause. A big part of emotional intelligence is the pause. Something comes at you, pause. Give your mind the time. By pausing, you're allowing yourself to think about it. How do you feel better than any other questions?